So several of you may or may not know, but US PrEP is actually an acronym. It doesn't stand for United States, but rather it's an acronym that stands for University School Partnerships for the Renewal of Educator Preparation. And we are, first and foremost, our work centers around strong university school partnerships. It originally, so in 2015, our former dean, Scott Ridley, at Texas Tech University, he piloted and scaled a new model of teacher preparation at Texas Tech. And when he became dean at Texas Tech, he told his president and provost, don't hire me if you're really not serious about partnership work. And Dean Ridley was very focused on school partnerships, on community college partnerships, and the idea being that as a university, as a college of ed, that we became very client focused, and that it becomes a we do this together as opposed to we prepare teachers for you. And so in 2015, after doing a lot of this work at Texas Tech University, the Gates Foundation released an RFP to become transformation centers. The idea being that at that time, that teacher prep institutions across the country were getting data back on their programs, data from CAPE reports or TPI inspections or different accrediting bodies. And they didn't necessarily, those data alone didn't support program improvement, but rather what it revealed was programs had a desire and opportunity to get better, but just didn't know how, and wanted to know who else was doing this that they could maybe lean into and leverage as resources. And so the Gates Foundation released an RFP, and US PrEP was one of 5 transformation centers to be awarded, and the only organization, the only center that actually worked with university-based programs. The other centers worked with different types of programs like National Center for Teacher Residency, Relay Graduate School. There was EPIC out of the State Department of Massachusetts, and then finally Teaching Works, which was out of University of Michigan, but worked directly with the centers and not directly with teacher prep providers. And so we took that really seriously, the idea that we knew that funders have not traditionally funded colleges of education. They have, in some ways, we know in the narrative, have given up on colleges of education. And so we took that seriously. And it started off with 6 universities in the coalition. And now, after 3.5 years, we are a coalition of 14 universities. And so I'll go ahead and give you a moment to take a look at the slide. You can just see who our current university partners are and their districts with whom they began the initial pilot. So when new universities join US PrEP, we commit and cohere around what we would call our 4 quality objectives. I'll give you just a moment to read over those quality objectives. So that first quality objective, building teacher candidate competency, this is the idea that we have as faculty in an institution, that we have identified clear competencies or practices or that we want candidates to know and be able to do by the end of our program. And not only are they identified, but we cohere and we norm around those competencies. So as faculty in school districts, we have a common understanding of what it looks like to be ready for the classroom on day 1. And so we look at that development in several ways. 1, the identification of those practices, but 2, the norming between the faculty, the mentor teachers, the supervisors who are in schools, etc. And then we ensure that our coursework allows for the teaching and practicing and assessment of those competencies throughout our program. The next one around data for continuous improvement is how universities are collecting data, visualizing data, and accessing data for the purpose of learning. And so it also includes that culture of data use within our higher ed institutions. So how, what types of structures do we leverage to utilize data and and inform program improvement based on the data that we're accessing. The third one is around teacher educators, and that we define teacher educators in several ways. The first way is our mentor teachers and or cooperating teachers in our schools. The second way is our field supervisors. We call them site coordinators. I'll talk about that in a moment, who are in schools, who are observing candidates teach. And the final one is our course instructors, who are teaching candidates or teaching pre-service teachers. And so traditionally, oftentimes, there are very few structures that allow for teacher educators to come together for collective learning. And so we work side by side with universities to ensure that those structures are fostered so that teacher educators actually have access to new learning for the purpose of improving their own practice. And then finally, and this should really be our first objective, is the idea that we're partnering with school districts on a deep level, not just not just calling the HR person and having them place our candidates, but they're actually have an active seat at the table when it comes to the design and implementation of our teacher prep program. So I wanted to move through the idea here with these 4 quality objectives is that that this work doesn't remain boutique in our programs, but rather we pilot this work in the initial year and then scale over time so that every teacher candidate is experiencing a really high quality teacher prep experience. When a new university joins US Prep, it's a 3-year commitment to pilot and scale these quality objectives that I shared with you earlier. So in year 1, it's a lot of planning, it's a lot of training, and then we launch a pilot. We start small. And then in year 2, we refine the pilot and we continue to scale. And then in year 3, we continue to focus on scale, of course, with a real large emphasis on sustainability. So there are 3 big buckets that I'd like to just highlight. The first one is the regional transformation support specialist. That is a personal coach, if you will, that works with you from US Prep, works with the leadership team, the deans, the faculty, everywhere from working on a transformation plan that's over 3 years, a project management plan, to helping with training with faculty and convenings and data summits and all of those things, the planning and support. I often hear from our university partners that they think their regional transformation support specialist works for them. And that's a huge compliment. We want that. And then also we are doing a lot to support research capacity. And the idea here is that, oftentimes we have found that a lot of faculty may work in isolation when it comes to conducting research, and that research is often focused on different interests, self-interests. So we work to think about how do we rethink research to be collective, so we're working on research together and really grounded in program improvement. And then the other big bucket I just wanted to highlight is we do symposiums and convenings and trainings throughout the year. So we're together a lot, face-to-face. US Prep provides all the funding for that work. And the idea of these different symposiums and trainings and convenings is that it's focused on different work. We were invited to Washington, D.C. to meet with the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. That's that far right picture there. And we were able to take our inaugural deans, and they brought a graduate with them. And next to Betsy DeVos, you may see her. On the far right there is Kate Walsh from NCTQ. And we sat at a big conference table, and they asked us about what are you guys doing? What changes have you made? And it was really interesting because, the secretary opened up that conversation, and she said she didn't pull any punches. She said, we don't really believe that colleges of education are doing a good job at preparing teachers. And so we invited you here because we know you're doing a lot of work around this, and we want to hear about what that work looks like. And we thought, as a little offensive as that may have been, we felt really honored to be at the table and to share this work. And since then, US Prep has done a lot to try to share information and really advocate on behalf of colleges of education. We believe when this work is being done well, that nobody does it better. And so we really advocate for our work, and that's a big part of what our email blasts do, as well as our symposiums and convenings, is a real opportunity to share the hard work and the good work that's happening in the coalition members. We thought it would be important to drill down around the key tenets of US Prep. When we say transformation, that's I think a pretty strong word, and there are things in our model, in the teacher prep model, that we see as really transforming. It's not just making some little shifts here and there, but really rethinking some of our program components in a teacher preparation model. And so I'm going to just share with you a brief overview of how we think about this work. So before you is a slide that has, we would say, and it could be similar or different to your institution, but we would say are the primary key players when it comes to preparing teacher candidates. So the green person is a faculty member, or maybe teaches coursework to students, to teacher candidates. The yellow person is a university/field supervisor. Typically that university field supervisor is someone who is part-time with the institution, maybe a retired principal, maybe a retired superintendent. But that person is not a full-time faculty member typically. Next to that person, we have the black with the apple in the center, and that's our mentor teacher and or cooperating teacher. And then finally, we have the red person, who is our teacher candidate. And we know that there are other roles, the department chairs, the deans, but primarily we would probably cohere around, these are kind of the big key roles when it comes to directly impacting teacher candidates. So I'd like to show you a slide, and I'd love for you just to, as you look at this slide, just to think about what are some noticings you have. If you took a 10,000-foot view, this would, I would say, a traditional college of education. You fly up 10,000 feet with, just in your head, or maybe if you're with somebody in this webinar next to you, just think about what are some noticings you have, and you're just going to do this quietly. I'm not going to. So as you're looking at this, one noticing I have is that the faculty, the green characters or the course instructors, are in the university building. I don't really see a lot of them outside of the university. And another thing I notice is that there often, I see some silos behind those faculty. So what I observe is that there are faculty who are kind of working in isolation of each other. I also see in our schools, I don't see school district partners. I see supervisors going, it looks like observing, several candidates. But my wondering is what's the connection to the university? And so I'm sure that there are other noticings as we drill down, and it could be that this resonates with you in some ways, or maybe it could be that this doesn't resonate with you, that maybe your structures at your institution look much different than this. But some of the questions I have around this is, whose job is it to ensure strong partnerships with schools? Whose job is it to select and train mentor teachers? And one thing I know is that studies have revealed the important role that mentors play, that when mentors are really effective teachers, the mentor teacher role can be predictive of the teacher candidate once he or she graduates. So that would show us that we need to be really selective in who those mentor teachers are. So one question I would have is, who selects and train those mentor teachers to make sure that not only are they effective teachers, but they also are trained to coach candidates really well. Whose job is it in this model to ensure that the supervisors and the faculty who are teaching are normed around those instructional competencies, that data flows fluently from the field back to the College of Education, and that faculty really know what's happening in schools and they know how candidates are performing? So some big questions that I have, and I would say in my experience at several institutions of higher ed, there were some roles here that really presented a problem of practice related to what I just said. Who does partnership? Who selects and trains mentor teachers? Who ensures a fluid flow of coursework and how it's connected to the field, and vice versa, how the field is connected to coursework, making sure that coursework is really relevant. And so in US Prep, we addressed some of those problems of practice through what we call a site coordinator. And that's this blue figure in the middle here. And so we have, in the role of transformation, we shift away from a part-time supervisor to a full-time, typically clinical faculty who's housed in a school site and oversees a cohort of teacher candidates and mentor teachers. And so that full-time faculty is the person who does the performance assessments and walkthroughs, who observes candidates in the field. They provide ongoing coaching and feedback to those teacher candidates. They work closely with principals to train and select mentor teachers. They are still coursework methods instructors, so they still teach classes. And of course, what we have learned is that because they're in the field so often, they have completely rehauled in some ways their courses based on what they're learning about being connected to those schools and what they're learning about classrooms. And so it's this continuous flow of improvement for these teacher educators. They facilitate quarterly governance meetings with principals. And then they meet with mentor teachers quarterly for mentor teacher trainings. And so, so when we think about this, this is the work of what it looks like to pilot this kind of new model of teacher preparation, as aligned with our 4 quality objectives. And then as we grow and scale, we think about this work over time. It becomes that we become very focused on school partnerships and grow our clinical faculty over time so that they're housed in schools doing this work with school district partners. So I shared a lot of these, but I'll just show you a slide that kind of highlights the key tenets of our work. So highlighting just what we talked about in that model, you might be asking yourself, I don't know if this is doable for us. I would say almost every institution who has joined US Prep has questioned that. And you saw the scale impact rates from before that I shared with you. We work with flexibility to work within your context for the work. And we recognize that each institution in US Prep services different teacher candidates, diverse candidates in all ways. So we think, I would say, nimbly and flexibly around your different pathways to teaching. So I created this slide just for you to look at in how we've been working and what we've learned. And I think this shows some of the outcomes of our work too. So if you look on the left side, you can see these 2 pathways, one on the left here and one on the right. And the one on the left, if you are let's say you're a high school student and you're getting ready to choose a profession or think about what you want to be in life, we work with our school district partners to think about different high school programs that could help us recruit future teachers. So if you're in Texas, Taffy is one program. If you're not in Texas, Educators Rising is another program. But the idea that high schools are thinking early, and we're working with our high schools to think about these types of programs to recruit candidates early. In some of our universities and high school districts, they've began early college high school programs. and specifically attracting and recruiting future teachers. So we've worked side by side with universities who are doing some of that type of work. We really focus too on community college partnerships. We recognize that not every university is primarily transfer students, but we know that community college partnerships offer pathways that are really accessible and financially available to future teachers. So we really try to leverage our community college partnerships. On the right side of this graph graphic, you see these could be second career teachers. So teachers who maybe already have a degree and are going to teach. They want to become a teacher. And so what kinds of programs are available to them that are really accessible? And so we've worked with universities to implement post-bac master's type programs. And ensure high quality. But the idea being that for every pathway, you enter the center there, which is a rigorous teacher preparation training. So every student, regardless of the pathway they take, enters into a program through you all that is very high quality and rigorous, ensuring that candidates are really ready to teach. And what we've seen is because the teacher preparation, you all work closely with school district partners, we see school district partners leveraging their resources to support this kind of work. So in the pink, you can see that some of the school partners actually fund the site coordinator. They began, we see this in several of our institutions of higher ed where the school district has said, we believe in this work so much that we're going to help fund the role of the full-time faculty member. Other areas we see is that they provide candidates with stipends during their student teaching experience, mentor stipends. And then across the board, what we're seeing is that in these partnerships, districts are offering contracts early to teacher candidates before they graduate. So they'll open up their hiring practices early. And oftentimes they'll begin the graduates on a different step of a salary structure than other new teachers. And so what a great way to leverage those types of initiatives with recruitment of teachers into your program. And so this is just the beginning, but you can see how when, through partnership and being client-centered, that we're leveraging resources from many organizations to increase your candidate pipeline, to increase enrollment, to think about different ways that will encourage candidates to get jobs in the school districts where they're trained and choose your program. Thank you again. Feel free to reach out, and I hope you have a wonderful week.